Yeah, see. Thank you.
Yes.
Go ahead, take it from the start.
I want to call to order the Historic Landmarks Advisory Commission for June 13th, 2022. Welcome back, everybody. It's been 2 years since we've had a in-person meeting. So we're all going to be struggling with mics if we're not used to this. So let's start with a roll call. And we'll just be left to right.
That's nothing for this.
Sheila Snow, first speaker.
Ron, I think is my name, at large.
Ready to vote for the district.
And keep talking for the chair. I want to move one item up, item number 6, the HLAC budget. We have someone that's going to speak to us remotely, so that's item number 6 next. So let's move on to item number 6, it's the HLAC budget. The County Historic Landmarks Advisory Commission will discuss the budget.
I believe that Mr. Urban is here in attendance remotely, and then Mr. Martin here for the documentation and Mr. Urban. So what we're waiting for today is final approval. And once that happens, I can submit Mr. Urban's invoice to our account.
So go ahead, Chris, and go ahead and do your report.
Hi, good morning. This is Chris Irvin. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thanks. Audio on my end is not too good, so you'll have to excuse me if I ask you to repeat any questions that might come along. But I'll just plow into my report. Is it okay if I share my screen?
Yes, you're co-host now, so you should be able to pull up your screen.
Okay.
So Chris, I just wanted to just confirm, this is, you're not showing anything different than what's in the Flex file that you submitted, correct?
I'm sorry, David, what was the question?
If you were submitting, if you're showing materials that were submitted to the HLAC box folder.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I won't be showing anything I haven't already submitted. Okay, so anyway, what can you see my screen, the project report at this point?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I asked David if he could please distribute this to all commission members. So I'm hopefully you all have a copy of this handy. But anyway, I just wanted to briefly go through this report. It's just a 3-page report, but I'm going to even go through it even more briefly than that. Touch on the 2 deliverables that we did, and just briefly touch on the executive summary. I wanted to talk mostly about the exceptions that I found along the way, and a few of the recommendations that came out of the project. So just briefly, the 2 major deliverables of this project was to create an electronic inventory of all the existing Historic Landmark Advisory Commission files that are the physical files, and get them into a spreadsheet inventory form containing data elements approved by county staff. There are 28 data elements altogether. And then the second deliverable is a system that organizes the physical materials into archival quality document boxes. And these boxes are labeled with a very simple numbering system that ties back to the electronic inventory. So the 2 major deliverables, the electronic inventory and the physical materials, the historical materials are now in archival boxes, are tied together intellectually. So next, just quickly touching on the executive summary portion of the report. When I started this project, my understanding was that I was going to find 3 different classes of materials: landmark materials, landmark properties, places of historic merit. So in shorthand for that is the merit properties. And then any other properties that were not landmarks or merit were considered to be under review or had been reviewed. And so my shorthand for that is review. But what I found was there was a 4th class of materials in the physical materials that were administrative in nature. So they were not really necessarily properties, but they had to do with the management of the day-to-day administrative aspects of the HLAC. So those I created a 4th class called admin, or for short for administrative. So that's kind of the major elements coming in out of the executive summary. So what I'd like to do then is move on from that to some of the exceptions that I found. I won't get into all the details. It'll be a little make your eyes glaze over if I get into too much of the detail. But on the 2nd page of the report, I provided a before and after picture of the physical materials in the hearing support office. So it gives you a kind of a quick feel for what's been accomplished. The project start, all of the files were held in file pockets that just sort of loosely arranged on the shelf. And at the end, at project completion, those file pockets, each holding property files, properties, landmark, review, merit, or admin files, are now in archival quality boxes, and they've been arranged also. So there was some arrangement I found, but I have imposed much more of a organization arrangement that coincides with the inventory that's now on the spreadsheet. So moving on to the exceptions that I found along the way, there aren't too many, and I don't think anyone would be surprised by these, but I did want to make sure that we touch on the gaps. One of the advantages of doing an exercise like this in organizing these materials is that it brings to the surface, it brings to our awareness any gaps that we might have in the paperwork. The first item is, I won't go into the landmark number 45, the Foley Estates Vineyard and Winery property. I brought this to the attention of the commission through email early in the project, and I won't get into that. We've kind of documented it through email. And it's been discussed, and it's a known entity. So I wanted to get into the second bullet point about the materials that I actually found that were physically missing. And there are 4 properties that had no paperwork at all that I found in any of the places where we have paperwork. So hopefully these 4 properties, the Davison House, which is landmark number 51, the Glen Oaks Stable Carriage House, which is a merit property, the Hermosillo Road, which is also a merit, and the Tunnel Brown House merit. These 4 properties, if these are missing paper, there's 0 paperwork for any of these in any of the files. I have left an empty file jacket in case these materials are found, and they can be added to the archival quality boxes in case they come around. I imagine these materials are sitting on a computer somewhere. They're more recent properties. They probably just are totally digital. No one ever printed them out, is my guess. And if we want to have a physical version of them in the files, then they would need to be printed out and filed. But not too much. You know, you can see those are the only gaps. And probably most importantly and lastly, I wanted to talk about recommendations. And the recommendations are really related to preservation. You know, part of, you know, as an archivist, we archivists we care about access to materials, and we care about their preservation. We want them to last as long as possible, and we also want to make them easily accessible. We've made them very easily accessible, and we've helped preserve them by putting them into these archival quality boxes. But there are a few items that I wanted to bring to the Commission's attention, which end up being kind of in the form of recommendations for going forward. And they were out of the scope of this particular project. So just briefly, so these physical materials that have been organized just at a high level represent 50 years, a half century of the HLAC's work since 1966 through 2020. There was no materials after 2020, no physical materials. Again, I think it's probably because everything's gone digital. But so what that really means is these materials that are now physically on the shelves really represent in some ways, especially the early materials, maybe the first 20 to 30 years of these materials before the advent of personal computers and office automation, may represent the only existing copy of the HLAC's materials. So these are historical in nature and maybe even the only existing copies. So it's something to take into consideration. So thinking about that, that these are the importance of these materials because they might be the only existing copies. Looking through the materials, the preservation issues I found that need to be addressed through a potential future effort is these last 5 bullet points that are on the report. I'll just quickly touch on them. There were 14 files in which I found original photographic materials. And so they're fine the way they are, but best practice would be to individually sleeve these photographs so that over time they do not fuse to the materials next to them. They sit next to them. So preservation quality sleeves, it's pretty common practice to put photos in these kinds of clear sleeves. They don't fuse to each other. They don't fuse to paper next to them. They keep them from rubbing. So it helps them to last as long as possible. I also found magnetic media in the files that over time it's known that VHS video cassettes, audio cassette tapes need to be reformatted. They need to be brought forward so that we can continue to access them in the future. And usually that means, converting them to digital media files. I mean, some of us still have a VHS player around, but I wouldn't recommend running a VHS tape cassette through a machine because there's always something that could go sideways, and it's best to just take these materials and bring them forward by converting them to digital. A lot of audio cassettes and just a couple of VHS tapes I think I found. Let's see, there was some also optical media, meaning CD-ROMs, DVD-ROMs. These are ones that are not professionally recorded, but ones that were probably made off of personal computers. They are known to have a life span of only about 10 years before they start showing errors. So it's also good to get that off. So even though CD-ROMs we consider to be fairly modern materials, that optical media is known to deteriorate. And we need to get that off of there and get it on more stable media onto like a hard drive. Also found some newsprint, news clippings about historic properties are sprinkled throughout the files. And those newsprint is very acidic. It tends to transfer its the print, the yellowing of the newsprint tends to transfer to the materials that are next to it. So those should be reformatted, meaning photocopied onto acid-free paper, and then the old newsprint thrown away. And the last thing I'll mention is I did find evidence of pests in some of the files, but it's not uncommon for things that are 50 years old. But as usual here in Santa Barbara, we have a lot of evidence of silverfish. I did not find any live pests, which is good news. It just seemed to be old evidence of nibbled on paper and droppings. Those have all been cleaned up. Well, the droppings have been cleaned up. The dust, any dust accumulation has been cleaned up. And but other than that, no big pest problem that was found, but it's good practice to continue to have a regular pest control, in the building that occurs on a regular basis, which it probably does. So that's really the end of my report, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you very much, Chris. So who would like to start with questions? I have, let's start with Commissioner Nyla.
Thank you, Chris, for that presentation. I would really appreciate it if you could walk us through your database that you put together with each of the landmarks and structures of merit, and so on and so forth.
I'd be happy to do that. And thanks for reminding me I was going to do that.
That's the real meat of what we wanted. We were hired you to do, of course. It looks fabulous. If you could walk us through the various columns, that would be very helpful.
Okay, be happy to do that. So I've switched my screen to, I created an abbreviated copy of the database, the spreadsheet, and hopefully you can see it right now. The very first column, of course, is the name of the property. Can everyone see that okay?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, great, thanks. So what I've done here is in this abbreviated list, the second column you'll notice is the class that I spoke of earlier, the 4 different classes of landmark, merit review, and admin. So I have a little sampling here of some of the properties, so we could see each of what they might look like on here and in the database. And so the name of the properties here it's the stuff you've been dealing with forever. I won't go over too much here. The landmarks, I've highlighted here the very first 3 landmarks: the Sexton House, the Sisquoc Store, Maddie's Tavern, and the Davison House are here. They're all their particular landmark status numbers are here in the status number field. So 14, 46, 47, 51. You may be wondering why the Davison House seems to be highlighted in pink. Well, that's because that was one of the missing paperwork landmark ones. So I just wanted to make sure that it just jumps out at whoever begins maintaining this particular spreadsheet going forward, that it jumps right out at them that those 4 properties I mentioned that are missing their paperwork, these are the ones that could be resolved pretty quickly. You'll also notice that because I didn't have any paperwork, this particular row has no data in each of the columns. So, but getting back to the particular columns, the other key piece of information, or the key piece of information, is the document box number. So, for example, Sexton House, the very first row, it's Sexton House, if anyone's ever looked through the physical materials for the Sexton House, so they've noticed that there's a lot of files. So there's so much paperwork that it actually fits into 7 different file jackets, which is what's been documented here under the files column, that there's actually 7 files. So if somebody wanted to actually look at Sexton House, then they looked at this inventory to figure out, well, which boxes are they in? They will note here that they're across 3 different boxes, box 4, box 5, and box 6. So box 4 through 6 is where the physical location is of Sexton House files, and there are 7 of them. Resource type building, this is pulled directly from the nomination form. Was there a nomination form found in the files? Yes. There are some cases where there were not. For All Saints by the Sea, for example, which is about the 6th row down. Well, it was under review, so that's why there's a lot of the properties that were never made it to landmark or merit status. They were under review for such a status. Never even got a nomination form. So so that's what that column is for, is whether or not there's a nomination form. Nomination form, of course, has got is where the meat of all the information about a particular property is, and sort of the starting point of the commission considering a particular property. The APN, the assessor's parcel number, when found, is in the column. Of course, some of the properties have multiple assessor's property numbers, and I've squeezed them all into a single field. So you'll see that, like here, Maddie's Tavern is made up of multiple assessor APNs. The particular city that they're located in is also the next column to the right. And I'm going to scroll over so we can start to see other columns here. And street address for the property, the HLIC adoption date. If I could find a date for the property, then that would be put here. You might have a question about the date format. Well, this is an archival standard date format that you're seeing here: year, month, and day. It might look to you like I must be from Europe or something, but actually this is an American archival standard, because that way the dates, if you ever sort data by the date, this is the way that they will sort. The computer will sort it sequentially properly. The Board of Supervisors designation date is also in the next column here. The resolution number, that would be the Board of Supervisors resolution number that was found in the file. Usually is don't have to tell you guys, the year followed by the resolution number. Was there, now this is where some of the analysis that I put into the process, I went through every single file on those in the file jackets, and this is where I gleaned a lot of this information. Was there a site map in the files, and yes or no? Were there photos? Most properties ended up with site maps or photos as part of the nomination form process. HR report, historic resources report. Was there a professionally done historic resources report in the file? A lot of times no, but a lot of times yes. The particular examples I'm using here, there was no. HR study. At times I had to kind of split hairs to figure out the difference between a study and a report. Sometimes it was just language on the report. It seemed like over time, whether something was a historic resources report, or it was a study, or it was a survey, there was some overlap, and so I did my best here to distinguish between them. Was there a sketch, a historic resources sketch, meaning something that wasn't really professionally done, but perhaps the person who submitted the nomination form, who might not be a professional historian, did write up what they knew about the historic aspects of the property. So that's what the sketch column is for. Was there an inventory? Again, splitting hairs here. I tended to say no, there was no inventory unless there was a very specific paperwork listing out the very specific historic elements or items of the property. Was there a hearing notice? Is another column here, yes or no? All of these columns are pretty much yes or no. It's whether or not the person who's going to look through the file can expect to find paperwork or don't even bother looking, because you won't bother finding any of the paperwork. Or you could also take it from the approach of, here's something we need to add to the file, the physical file, because we don't have an agenda or we don't have a minute order in the physical file, but we've got it digitally. So, you know, if it's felt to be necessary, it could be printed out and inserted into the file. An agenda letter, yes or no. I'm going to scroll over. I think this will be the last little bits of, you have to move this down. Okay, yeah, the last columns here, there tend to not be a lot of data for, was there a hearing date? You know, perhaps someone much more involved with the commission would know where to look for the hearing date, but a lot of times I was not able to find a hearing date. A considered date, you know, when was the, I imagine considered date might come out of agenda minutes or meeting minutes. Any exemptions, and most importantly, I put an additional column on here for preservation. Most of the columns, most of the rows are blank for preservation because I didn't find any preservation issues. But here I wanted to, this is actually kind of a breadcrumb trail. One of my, my recommendations at the end of my report are, we've got photographs that need to be sleeved. We have DVD videos and VHS videos that need to be transferred to digital form. Well, without having to look through every file again, I've noted here where directly to look, which files to look into to find those things should a preservation effort be decided. So that's kind of I've gone through all the various columns. I'm going to scroll back here to the front of the spreadsheet inventory. And again, the document box number is the key piece of information for where to find the particular physical files. Let's see. I think that's about it. Now maybe I should ask for questions.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Chris. Any more questions? Okay, let's see if Commissioner Duncan, did you have a question? And then we'll go to commissioners.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much for your work on this, Mr. Oakland. It's a job that is really neat to be done, and it's great that somebody's so thorough to do it. And as you've done it, you've exposed more work to be done. But I just have a few couple of clarification questions for us. I was going to ask, but where we would find these various media that we need to copy, but now I see you put this in all in the preservation file. So we'll actually find those documents in the boxes now.
Correct.
Okay. And then the other thing I wondered about is you did take a number of the properties and put them to a separate box, box 30. You sorted them according to Carpinteria, Guadalupe, and Santa Maria. But we can see that Sexton House, for instance, which is in Gallia, isn't in box 30. So you didn't choose to put the Gallia
documents all in a separate place.
Yeah, so that's exposing my lack of knowledge about what properties might have been transferred to municipalities. I my you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Sexton House, being landmark number 14, it was an early property designation that preceded the cityhood of Goleta, and and again, I'm exposing my lack of knowledge. I'm guessing that the county transferred county landmarks to Goleta after it became a city. I could be wrong about that. So really,
You're answering my question, Mr. You're answering your question, but
okay.
this was a rough sorting process based upon addresses you saw. And this will not tell us necessarily whether an item falls within a city limits or remains within our jurisdiction. We'll have to do that ourselves.
Correct. The jurisdiction aspect was not necessarily clear to me going through the paperwork.
We didn't ask you to do that. Thank you. That's something we're always having to sort out. I do want to thank you again. And I've got some specific questions, and those are sort of for the ongoing project. And I don't know if, Mr. Chair, you want to have that under project discussion, because it's not really our budget discussion, but I do have some specific questions about this going forward.
We're gonna look at the budget after this item, so we could discuss it there. I mean, I have a couple of questions for process going forward, but I think if you have a process question, go ahead and ask that now as far as monitoring.
No, it's about ongoing how we will use this and how we will interact with staff to continue to use this and maintain it. And right now, I think we're under the budget section on the agenda,
right, to
approve this payment as compared to how will we use this project further on down the road. That's a different item on the agenda. So I'm just hoping by deferring that, we can get to some other things in the meantime.
Yeah, let's defer that for now.
Mr. Chair, did you have a chance to actually physically look at this?
Yeah, but first I'm gonna ask any other commissioner comments, questions? Sure.
I have comments for
At the end, okay. My question, I had a question for, first of all, I did want to say that I did go down and look at the filings on June 2nd, and it is amazing difference. It is just, I mean, you walk in there and it's so clean. It used to be so many files stacked everywhere. So this is such a great improvement. My question, you kind of answered it, Mr. Urban. I know it says we have 2 extra empty boxes, and that's something that the commission going forward will have to be buying more boxes to keep up with this. And of course, how we're going to keep up with this will be a discussion we need to do. But I know you did the historic landmarks first as a group, and then you did the historic merits. So when we have new landmarks, unfortunately, it looks like we're going to have them in a way further down box at the end, like a box number 71. I think you said there's 71, 72 are empty. So, I mean, unless we shifted all the numbers and all the data. So is that correct that if we have, say, a new landmark coming down the road, it won't be in order in the files? We have the online computer system that will just tell them it's box number 71 or 72. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah, physically, yes, they would be separated because from the original arrangement, but intellectually, it still is just as accessible because the inventory tells you exactly what box it's in. So you could still walk directly to the right box regardless of where it is on the as long as the inventory continues to be maintained.
Yeah, that's what I did. I had a spreadsheet in front of me. I just looked and I said, oh, I want to look at X. And I went, there was the box. I pulled the box. it's all in order. I mean, it is an amazing, easy access system that we have. Let's see, I have Commissioner Malcolm, you have a question?
Yeah. Um, yeah, I appreciate all the work we've done with this, it looks great. However, just one question about, you suggested throwing away some of the newsprint after copying it. It's a historic document, why would you not put it in the archival sleeve like photographs?
I'm sorry, could I have the question repeated?
You suggested to throw away some of the newsprint after copying it into the digital file for some of the records that have newsprint articles.
Correct. Yes. Yes,
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, did I, I'm not sure I answered the question.
No, I was just wondering why would we not want to put them in like a archival sleeve like you suggested doing with the photographs?
Oh, I got you. So that's kind of a decision. Yes, you could individually sleeve the newsprint, but once it's been photocopied onto acid-free paper, it really would become duplicative. So it just becomes extra paper, and now you have to go, you're going to buy a sleeve for it. But photocopying, today's photocopiers do such an excellent job of photocopying old newsprint that I mean, there are times when I photocopy things at the historical museum where I actually end up with a more legible copy than the newsprint, the original newsprint itself, which is yellowed. The contrast, of course, between black and white is going to be much greater on the photocopied version than from the yellowed newsprint. So it's a matter of choice. If somebody really feels strongly that they want to put out the extra cost for the preservation sleeves so that they can keep the archival, the original copy of the newsprint, that's a decision that can be made. But the sleeving is necessary because of the continued transfer of the acidic paper, the newsprint, to the papers next to it.
Thank you very much. Commissioner
A couple of quick questions, Mr. Urban. You mentioned the Foley Estates vineyard as problematic, and I didn't quite understand whether you received all the information from commissioners and whether that was solved for you as far as your inputting information.
Well, I'm not sure it was solved in my mind, but I'm kind of a black and white kind of a person, and it seemed like it made sense from reading the correspondence between commission members. It seemed like it made sense to the commission members, and so I've just sort of left it at that.
All right, thank you. Secondly, I'm kind of leaning into the mic, so you'll make sure you hear me. You have invoiced for this work $2,886 to the county. Can you remind us of what your estimated budget was before you started the project?
That exact same amount.
Oh, was it? I don't have it in front of me, that's why I asked. Okay, that answers a good question for all of us up here.
And it's not because I'm so good at estimating things, it's just that I had put a provision in the statement of work that the price would not exceed.
I see. Well, I could go on and on extolling the work that you've done, and I have some other comments that I'll take up under another item in the agenda. Thank you.
Any more questions? Let's move to. Oh, yes, go ahead.
Just a brief one, would it be wise for us right now to buy several more boxes, looking towards the future? Whether it's making the same boxes and everything else?
Well, we have two right now that are empty. And I was thinking when we get to the budget item, we actually see what our dollars that we own, we could discuss that then. And how to move forward, make sure that we don't get back to the situation we were before. So any more questions or we move to comments? Okay, let's start with, is there any public comment on this item from the public that would like to speak? This is on this item.
General.
We'll get to the general public comment shortly. Okay, hearing now public comment on this item, let's move to comments from the commissioners. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Mr. Chair, I'm just so thrilled we got this worked out. And I'm very grateful to Mr. Urban. I'm very grateful to Commissioner I for recommending him. And getting us to do this so opportunely is that it's hard to work out. What my comments later on, my project will be how we can keep this going. And I think that's so critical. As noted by Commissioner and I before, the billing is exactly what was proposed. And in fact, we've already authorized this payment. All we have to do is essentially accept the work as completing the contract and to finalize it in that respect. And I think we got more than our money's worth in terms of the amount of time, labor, and communication. I did want to also, however, confirm, probably for our staff, Mr. Villalobos, that he's satisfied as to what has been the outcome, because I know he was instrumental in us deciding some of the parameters of the project.
Well, I think that the starters work is pretty exceptional. Certainly this is a project that the HLAC can really kind of take it upon themselves to really address an issue that's been longstanding. I think that I really appreciate the breadcrumbs, Mr. Urban, because I was thinking in my mind, like sorting through the files and, picking up the media issues and the newspaper issues and the photo issues, and you sounds like you've made it really easy for us. So, I mean, I think I'm very impressed by your thoroughness. So staff is very satisfied.
Commissioner Smith. Commissioner.
As I said, my comments are that it's a fabulous job, and I hope we can work again with Mr. Urban on new pursuits. Thank you.
Commissioner Napa, any comments? I just want to concur with everybody else after seeing this in person, how this project was done. Thank you very much for, first of all, permission for granting to go ahead with this, and of course, getting Mr. Urban to do the reports. Really nice. So we do need to approve the invoice. This is a final approval for the archiving project by Chris Urban. And does someone like to make a motion to approve this?
I move that the commission approve the report and findings that were submitted by Mr. Chris Urban. And that we approve of it. That HVAC will pay Mr. Urban's invoice.
Okay, so let's quickly do a quick roll call.
I'll second that.
Oh, we got a second, okay. We got a second from Commissioner Duncan. Any comments, discussion on the vote?
Yeah, I would like to accept it, however, with what stipulation that we do, try and preserve any newspaper articles as well. And in the camp, it's always good to preserve the original document if we can. I don't know how much this costs. However, I think it's always worth the extra expense just to keep a piece of history and keep credit. And do the backup as well, make a photocopy, a copy of it, plus, preserving the original.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
I suggest that the commission take a vote on whether or not to accept.
that's what the vote is on the payment. I
Right.
think we can discuss that later.
Right.
Well, I thought we we're just accepting the report as well, including the payment, sorry, but I misunderstood.
Right, I think what I'm saying, and I think what the chair is saying, is what you're discussing is a process issue moving forward. So that should be something that's separate.
My mistake.
I'm thinking we'll get to the budget, look at the budget and look at where to go going forward. That will be. So, any more? Let's have a vote, let's do it left or right.
I,
Commissioner Nelkov
I,
and Chair Kaufman, great aye. Thank you very much. Okay, let's move to we're still in the budget, and I believe staff has our current budgets now. I'd just like to make a comment. I hope in the future we get this in our packet so we can look at it.
No, I apologize for that. As much attrition as our development review divisions have, our county divisions barely hanging in there. So it does take a little bit longer than material. I do apologize. I do think our accounting staff would be able to provide this at all.
Mr. Chair, what would you like us to do?
Okay,
This was in our electronic packet.
oh, it was.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
It appears that we have sufficient funds to
Okay.
pay professional services.
So should we discuss this now or have a separate item on the agenda going forward? I mean, because there's a lot of different things out there that we can use money for. Besides, we'll continue, maybe the first step is to continue finish off this archival. Yes. There's other items that we want to do. I know Commissioner Duncan wanted to speak on this, so.
Well, Mr. Chair, I'd like to put this under project discussion, what we do going forward. In terms of the budget that we're looking at now, obviously the funds are going to come out of this to pay Mr. Irvin. And then we've got a request for a rollover that hasn't been heard or decided, I take it, by the board of supervisors.
I'm sorry, that was the last part.
So we had also asked that the board roll over remaining funds into our next budget. So, but I believe the board has not included the budget discussions, so we don't have an answer.
Right, the budget hearings aren't, we were actually next week.
But tomorrow, I think it's tomorrow. I saw so many.
We may have some more information on that at the next time.
Okay, that would be helpful for us to know in the future. But then, Mr. Chair, I'd be glad to discuss what we do with this project and others from forward. I would suggest putting out the project after we hear from the public. So we don't delay
Yes.
It's not in front of me. And I apologize for not seeing the budget. That's good. Okay, so that's the end for right now for the item number 6. So we'll move on to the agenda. And the next item will be a public comment. We do have speakers today. As I call your name, please come up, and I'll say that there's 3 today. So we'll first start with Fran Galt.
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for all your hard work to save our historic places, and in particular, for all your efforts to bring.
Can you move your mic a little closer? Thank you.
Particular thanks for your efforts to bring Rocky Nook back for another chance. Everyone is excited for this possibility. The park fulfills all criteria on its own and completes the landmarks of the mission area. Its location at the entry to Mission Canyon and steps from the city has long been valued by residents and visitors and is more critical today than ever before. All periods of history are represented, from ancient times to the present. The catastrophic debris flow, the natural stream with fresh water and riparian environment, so important to the local Chumash Native Americans. It was vital in the founding of the Presidio and to the building and development of the mission. Rocky Nook is a historic cultural landscape and a part of the larger cultural landscape, especially the waterworks. All are walkable and free to the public. Francis Dabney Oliver and George Oliver bought a little rancho in 1881 and named it Rocky Nook. They were among the first cultured and influential settlers in the area. Mrs. Oliver always wanted Rocky Nook to be saved for the public. And after she died, friends of the Olivers raised the funds to buy the first 9 acres. It became one of the first public parks in the county in 1928. I hope all of those in power finally honor it and protect it for future generations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker will be Alina Khan. And will be followed by Roseanne Michaels.
Good morning, Commissioners. Yes, thank you very much for all the work you have done on trying to save Rocky Nook Park. And I agree with everything Fran Galt said. Rocky Nook Park is the missing link in our history because it goes backwards to the Chumash, really, from 8,000 years ago. We have place names around here, including right by the bridge. The place name that I can't pronounce right now because I didn't write it down, but it means wild cherry trees. And they gather wild cherries here in Rocky Nook Park. And as Fran said, there are bits and pieces of all of our cultural and natural history here. The debris flow, native plants, the creek and its natural water course with boulders. The Chumash used the materials, and these materials are still here. There is a spiritual feel here that the Native Americans still enjoy, and the rest of us feel that as well. The Chumash built the aqueduct and the ditch that went down to the Presidio. We have the rock foundation of the cottage that was either built in Spanish or during the Mexican era. And then, of course, Rocky Nook Park, Rocky Nook, that was created by the Dabney Olivers, and it was purchased from the mission, not from a real estate agent, that some of the lands in Mission Canyon were already owned by. The park was begun in 1928, and it has remained as natural as possible. It is really beautiful the way the Park Commission has put in curving roads and left the boulders and left the trees in the islands. And there's it really is a historic cultural landscape, and that part of it is very important as well. Annie Oliver lived most of her life in the Azores, and she was very familiar with drought-tolerant plants. So some of her plants are still there too, and they are worth protecting. I have a photo of a boulder in the creek near the bridge from 1912. I went and walked there, that boulder is still there. So I'm hoping that we will try to protect the natural environment here that's so important. We also have to remember that the contingency for the park is that the land's used for park only, and there is a deed restriction on the park. I also wanted to know before I leave, is this meeting being recorded so that we can hear your discussion that might occur? Anyway, thank you very, very much for all your hard work and your interest.
Thank you very much. And the last public comment is Roseanne.
Good morning. Roseanne Crawford, also addressing you this morning regarding the nomination of Robin Park. How long has it been now? 5, 6 years? Regarding looking at protecting this researched natural asset of ours, protecting it for future generations. With the rescinded bridge funds, it's water under the bridge. It's time to move forward with awarding the deserving landmark status. Its location and proximity of the historic Mission Creek Bridge, Mission Historical Park area and malls that are all under historic landmark protection under Pueblo Viejo 2, as you know. These are all physical features in this unique area that create a state of mind as you pass through the Mission Canyon corridor. The importance of Rocky Nook Park is included in the Mission Canyon Community Plan and cited several times throughout the lengthy document, particularly referenced in item 4 of the scenic corridor map on page 121. The dramatic boulders of an ancient debris flow are striking features in Rocky Nook Park that should be protected as part of the whole park that connects us with our past, spanning the years of the native Chumash settlement. The building of the historic mission under Spanish rule and later the early Santa Barbara period. Thank you very much for your consideration in taking the next steps forward to protect this valuable community jewel by making Rocky Nook Park a county historic landmark or landscape. Thank you for your time.
Thank you thank you all for coming. The question was, our meetings are always recorded, so what you said is recorded, correct?
Correct, today's meeting, all the meetings are being recorded. I think that just as a reminder, check off the gray that Rocky Nook Park does not appear on today's agenda. And outside of giving some indication of when that might be scheduled, it would be appropriate therefore for the commission to respond to any comments.
Right. Okay, that is the end of public comment. We'll move on to number 3, which is the minutes of May 9th, 2022. And it just was brought to my attention that we still have not seen the site visit minutes from March 21st. This is done just public. So that is something that we need to see in the future. So we wait.
Oh, thank you. I believe that the only outstanding issue on that was I think Mr. Duncan wanted the identities of the people who were given the tour. Because that was on your agenda a couple months ago. Oh, so we can just add that on. I did make an attempt with Mr. Stewart to ask for that information. He didn't have any more information than I did, so I was going to take a look at the nomination forms if they had any information from there. I just want to set expectations. So yes, I think it's a little perfunctory at this point, but get that on, so we can get those formally adopted.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Yeah, we actually ended up deferring that because if we didn't have the correct majority of people who were on the site visit. then that's it.
We'll move on to the minutes of May 9th, 2022.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, and Commissioner Duncan, I want to thank you for doing these suggested revisions at that time.
you can either look at this document, which is actually our unapproved minutes, even though it says it's the agenda. And that's one of the first things you gotta make sure that we get changed. Or we can look at the document which I've sent to staff. If members have hard copy or another copy, it's themselves.
Would you like me to bring that?
Commissioners have-
Can you pull up
Just
what I
suggested revisions.
Thank you. First off, the title document should refer to the unapproved minutes, not agenda. And then the item under COVID, there's just a numbering error there, it should be number 2. And then on page 2,
Excuse me, I have a clarification, it just brought to my attention, we might not have a form to approve these at this time.
I was not at that meeting, so I can put.
So we do not have a form to approve these minutes, should we move this to the next? I hate to do this, but. Yeah.
I think that'd be fun to know this as well.
I'm sorry, I can't quite understand.
I think that'd be fine to do it, but approval to July.
Do you go ahead and go through the process or move it to the next month's agenda?
well, do we or don't we have, or do we need a majority of people who are there?
It's better to have the prepared people who are actually there. I could. There's a provision in your bylaws that I could find and read. So you would like to.
Because there's 3 of us here out of 5 that were here. So that's a majority. It's not a meeting, but it's not a majority.
Oh, I see, okay. So I think you could go ahead and,
Because we had 5 members at the last meeting and 3 of them were here.
yeah, so you have a quorum,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
yeah. Thank you for clarifying the question.
Point of order, told, come easy. Okay, and then, on page 2, there's just a little typo. For item 2, page, insert 2, and staff and attorney. And then under public comment 3, Brian Tipley's name is stuck there, it doesn't tell you everything. So I would suggest we put in Brian Tipley, the agent for the San Ynez Band and International News, was present to hear what might be said about the Canadian House meeting under district reports. That's what it is. And then under district report, we actually have a number of things. So I've got here, the government reported April 18th site visit to the Canadian House and San Ynez, where it's able to inspect the interior of the house and hear about the San Ynez Band and International News proposal for the property. Tribes been able to find site to move the house to and is considering various options, so they will return to HVAC consideration. And then, Commissioner Knight and Duncan discussed their research regarding the site for bedroom functions, Adobe, and the implication that the site appears twice, so scratch the second side. and the letter suggesting the county marker like this place. Information that currently reviewed or received suggests that the current Adobe rules are marked, but the correct Adobe rules are marked, but the issue is complicated by the many function members who work in the county. They will continue the research. And then, I do know, our chair mentioned his continuing efforts to assess how runoff from Tunnel Road is impacting the Santa Barbara Camp Garden, particularly the historic Mission Aqueduct, and how to address those impacts. And certainly, if Mr. Chair thinks that ought to be described in a certain way, I would defer to him on that. And then under approval of the Baker Chino letter, so this is on the next page, Jonathan. To be approved and sent, as we most importantly send it, the Kachuma Lake recreation area there with revisions, so we get the right name in our minutes. And then under item number 10, revise the agenda listing. And this is on the old item around the center. So for refers to us as the Historic Landmarks Advisory Commission, H5. Not the historical and not the. And then before public comment, I think we should importantly put in that Dr. Steve Windhaver, director of the SBUG, reviewed the additional materials provided to HVAC regarding previously requested revisions and new revisions to the proposed plan. And then what actually appears right now under comments is actually action. So what I suggest is we do actually put in the important comments that we made, and then move action down to an action item and revise it. So under each of the comments, these were what I suggest we say. Commissioners appreciated the requested changes to the open siding of the storage shed and composting toilet and the revised siding of the shed to reduce visual impacts. Commissioners particularly appreciated the excellent analysis of the project provided by David Stone. This was really important to get, if you remember. Analyzing the project consistency with the, it should say cultural landscape master plan, so it becomes the CLMP, and the potential to impact archaeological resources. Commissioners noted the decision to remove 2 additional stone benches and remove an existing one, increase the project's consistency with the CLMP. And then here are sets of action listing. So, and I would suggest that we Duncan moved, seconded by Knight, carried by the vote of 5-0, that the HI approved the addition, 2 additional wood benches for that country garden proposal, matching the wooden benches previously proposed, approved minor additions to the storage shed and composting toilet previously requested, approved the removal of an existing stone bench, and find that they do not substantially deviate from the historic landscape design concept, and find that the project is exempt from CEQA, correctly spelled, pursuant to CEQA guidelines 15308 and 15303. And I would certainly defer to any other commissioners' suggestions also.
Okay, there's 3 of us that were at that meeting, so Commissioner, do you have any comments? Oh, yes. Go ahead.
I apologize, I have to correct my earlier opinion I gave. Because I'm reading your bylaws there, it says under quorum, 5 members constitute a quorum. No preliminary or final action shall be taken concerning a project or item requiring a vote unless at least 5 members vote on the motion. And I think you probably have a couple people abstaining. They weren't there, so then I don't think this count as a vote. But I do think you need to actually have a vote at a subsequent meeting.
So,
Could these revisions be put in, and then
bring back for vote.
resubmit so we can read?
That's what I was going to suggest. We can incorporate changes and just bring it back as a updated draft of the next week. That way we don't have to go against it.
Okay. So we had 5 people at that meeting, so we have to have at least 5 yes votes.
You just have to have 5 votes. You know, if you have 2 people abstaining today, that's not 5 votes.
So then we have to make sure all 5 members of that meeting were at a meeting that we approved these minutes. That's, we wouldn't have 5 votes unless that. Correct.
We'll have the same issue next month for the settlements too.
You're not giving credit to those individuals who abstain as taking part in the vote.
I don't believe an abstention counts as a vote. I can research that further, but it's all.
Why don't we do this? We'll go through, do whatever we want to do today, bring it back July 11th. You can look into more thoroughly legalese, what we, you know, and find out if we need to have all 5 of those members present for it. Okay, so at least we can get it, the corrections done, and bring it back to July.
So we'll have 3 sets of minutes. I'm excited to settlements, minutes, and minutes from that.
So, Duncan, you said you had no. So I just want to say I'm fine with what Commissioner Benton mentioned, but I said I think general is better than have to be specific. Right, that's fine. So I'm fine. So we're fine with all the corrections.
No, I'm preparing to interject a comment on the next issue, next agenda item.
Oh. Okay, so, okay,
Thank you for asking.
okay, so we don't have to do, we don't need a vote on this because we don't have a vote, but we did all of our suggested corrections. They will be brought back to us at the next meeting, which I believe is July. Okay, so the minutes. Okay, let's move on to staff update.
This-
Item number
This is what I wanted to comment on, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I just might make a suggestion. The applicant's team has been here for a while on and everything else on our agenda is kind of in-house side of materials. It's just a suggestion.
Okay, yeah, I think that's fine. I noticed that they have been waiting. So let's move to, we're jumping around to it. Let's move to item number 9, which is the Coral Casino renovation. The County Historic Landmarks Advisory Commission will review and may approve modifications or deny proposed changes to the previously approved development plan -03000-00002 as amended most recently by 20-SBD-00000-0008 for the Coral Casino, Santa Barbara County Landmark 43, and may impose reasonable conditions as deemed necessary. The project proposes a revision to the approved design for its full service counter to meet requirements for universal access. HRD determined that the project is exempt from SWIFT pursuant to section 15331 of the Civil Guidelines because it is limited to maintenance, repair, stabilization, restoration, preservation, conservation, or reconstruction of historical resources in a manner consistent with the Secretary of Interior standards for the treatment of historic properties and guidelines for preserving, rehabilitating, restoring, and reconstruction of historic buildings. And the property is a 3.26 acre parcel, zone C-B, shown as assessment parcel number 009-353-015, located at 1281 Jam Drive in Montecito area. And this is in the first super facilities. So do we have any closures from the commissioner before we get started? Okay, so we can go ahead and start with the report.
This is Alex Tuttle from, if I could just interject real quick.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Your commission might recall that you actually reviewed a proposal for some modifications to the Coral Casino about 2 years ago, or a little less than 2 years ago, and approved those. Subsequent to that, as they were going through the building permit process, determined or were directed to propose some additional changes to meet ADA requirements. So given the landmark status of the Coral Casino, staff felt it was appropriate to bring those changes, albeit fairly minor, back to your commission for your review and consideration. So the applicant should be available to provide an overview of the plan changes and speak to any historic issues that may have come up. That's it for staff's presentation.
Someone that's going to go over the.
Yes, Chair and Commissioners. I'm Barry Winnick with Winnick Architects. Thank you for inviting us here today. It's nice to be in person. Thank you. I think this is a first for me in a long time. And thank you, Mr. Tuttle. I think his summary is pretty accurate. This is a pretty minor change that we're making. And maybe we can bring up the first images.
Absolutely.
Presentation. And you'd probably all be happy to know that the project is ongoing. The enhancement improvement project that Mr. Tuttle mentioned that came in front of you 2 years ago started construction in April.
Find your presentation, which I can pull up.
That's the first one. Anyway, so the construction's ongoing. It's been going rather well. Contractor is very sensitive. Anytime they've reviewed material, it's been properly cataloged, it's on site, which is always reassuring. We've got sensitive, well-trained people. So here's our project. It says review after funding. Go to the next page. What we're looking to do is to change the. Well, yeah, this will be helpful. You just go to the next page. Okay, so this is the site plan. Maybe scroll up a little further. Okay.
Why is this?
Okay, text. I didn't bring up the picture. So we're talking about the Finn's pool service. So just below where you see it says net existing, and then you see what's the courtyard of the Coral Casino. Just to the left and down from that is where the Finn's pool service is, which is off the main entrance corridor. And so this is where the revision is being asked for, and it's very minor. We're making the opening to the corridor a bit larger in order to create that handicap counter for accessibility, so that people there can sit at a lower counter and enjoy the same service as somebody that's not handicapped in the wheelchair. Next page, we'll figure that out.
Maybe if I'm just going to close this and then open it back up again.
Yeah, that's kind of weird. That's good. Oh, it's better. Okay, so yeah, that's great.
Right here.
I don't know if you have the ability to, but yeah, let's look at this photos. So this giving you context, that's the corridor, how it is existing. This is what was presented last time. You can see the little canopy over the window, which is the current Finn's pool service towards the pool. And as part of our previously approved project, that now wraps the corner to make a larger service counter. And the new proposal is just to make it a little bit larger. So you can go to the next page. Thank you. So these are the elevations on the left-hand side show what's existing. On the right-hand side shows the proposed. And that's the plan. You can see there had been an elevator which was close to non-historic, and we're changing out the elevator to a dumbwaiter in order to provide more room. therefore the counters will be made a bit longer. So that's really the change that's there. And that elevator, by the way, was not required for handicap access. It only goes down to the basement, and there's other elevators that provide that access. Next page. Yeah, just there's a certain showing you the plan on the left is what was approved. And the plan on the right is what we're asking to propose. If you look at the elevation above, the elevation on the left, it's proposed. Can we go to the next page?
That's the final page of this document.
Oh. Then I'm going to, can I hand this out or have you hand out to the members? Because this is showing, I'm seeing that one of the pages is missing from that document.
It was supposed to be a 6-page document.
Well, what I'm seeing missing is the proposed elevation. That almost looks like. What,
Let me see if there's any documents left.
do you have anything else on your computer? I mean, something's.
Is the large diagram on page 12 or
Could be similar to this. Could be, this is a better elevation. I will show you exactly what we're proposing. Because I'm not seeing it up there. I'd be happy to hand this towards you. Maybe, yeah, let's look at the report. Maybe it's there. If you don't mind,
No.
page 12.
12.
Thank you. Yeah, 12 and 13 on the report are the 2 pages that really you want to look at. So let's just do that. Thank you.
Could you speak up a little bit?
Oh, Shirley, I'm sorry.
It's all right.
But anyway, if you look on page 12, that explains it really, really well. It shows that there's a further, there was, in the previously approved plan, there's a 10'6" wide counter and it's being added for another 5'7", which makes it handicap accessible. That's showing on page 12. Pardon me? And then on page 14, shrinking count shows the elevation also with larger opening.
Yeah, maybe scroll.
Just need the report to catch up.
Page 12.
First, I'm going to go to page 12.
One more page. Yeah, that is over.
Perfect. And then after this, we'll go to page 14. So in plan, this is helpful. So you can see that there's an L-shaped portion, and then there's that extra extension on the right-hand side. And the piece on the right has the extra 5'7". So that's really what we're talking about is the change. Everything else is previously approved. And then if you don't mind, page 14.
Absolutely.
Thank you. One more page. There you go, because it's just a nice drawing of it. So on page 14, again, you can see the counter that was on the right, previously approved, and then the additional counter on the left, where it drops down to accommodate a person in a wheelchair, it drops down, and that's 5'7". I think the total area of opening that's increased is about 30 square feet. Really, that's how much I have to share. I think Tim wanted to maybe answer any questions and speak to the historic aspects of the project. And I'm available for questions.
Thank you.
Before you leave the vote,
Oh, sure.
to clarify again what you said about that elevator, because I couldn't help but notice that was a change. Now I understand first the elevator is historic, but there doesn't appear to be anything that describes what changes there might be on the exterior around the corner there. To the elevator.
So that's the great news. There, from the exterior, there's no differences. So if you, can you go back 2 pages in plan? So you'll see in this plan, in the upper right-hand corner, just past that window, it shows what's now a dumbwaiter. So the elevator, in essence, gets downsized into a dumbwaiter. It still has the same door facing the courtyard, and the override that's above the elevator stays the same. It's actually required for a dumbwaiter, but it stays the same. So there's no impacts based on the elevator. What the elevator afforded by making it go from elevator to dumbwaiter, it made the additional space to be able to have a counter space for handicap.
The other thing, I think that some of us might be concerned about here is the historic siding that's going to be removed. We're going to save that so that it can be used in the future.
Correct. So, and that's been the process that's literally happening on site today, because there's other work going on as part of this project. And anywhere there's been siding removed, it's been fully cataloged, it's taken off in a manner that it can be reused. And that is the mandate that the contractor on site is to reuse as much reclaimed material as possible. And then they also have any new material that, you know, if you need more material than what's being reclaimed, all new material is being cut specially to meet the old sizes. So they actually have to take 2x12, actually 2x14s and mill them down to 1x12s to make them dimensionally the correct size. And they're following that process as well. Okay. Sure.
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer those questions. Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Tim Hazeltine from Post Hazeltine Associates. I'm Dr. Post is over here, the senior partner. And it's a pretty straightforward project from a preservation perspective. The need to provide universal access is a requirement. The standards that speak to that are to minimize to the maximum extent feasible alterations to the historic building while achieving the universal access requirement. And Pam and I feel that this project does that as it confines the alteration to the minimum amount of opening to provide this lower counter so as various people in wheelchairs can access that. Materials being stockpiled. And we believe this does meet the standards because the impact to the building does not rise to the level that it impairs the structure's ability to convey its historic design, its historic building fabric, character of its historic building fabric, and its historic building materials. It's also reversible. In the future, it is possible that someone could take that opening out and take the archived siding and reinsert it, or have new siding made if necessary to infill that area where the counter is filling. So it meets standard 10, and it meets, that's the reversibility standard, and it meets the other relevant standards, which should probably be 2, and 5, perhaps 7. So we're supportive of the change. We feel the resource will maintain those characteristics that make it a county of Santa Barbara. If you have any questions, we're happy to answer them.
Mr. Necker?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. One obvious question that might be asked would be the previous approval allowed for a substantial expansion of the county for Finn's service area. And could we go to the elevations which show what was previously approved as what was converted? Yeah, page 14 of our document. So the upper image is what's currently approved, and the lower image is the proposed. So one very obvious question might be, well, what if we just take that section that needs to be lowered out of the previously approved? Would that have resulted in a better project in terms of the way it fits in the Coral Casino? Or is it actually better to add it on the way it is now because of the less stress on the horizontality? It is our understanding that that this is actually probably the preferred solution. My understanding is that the new counter that was approved already, the previously approved counter is fairly not very long as it is. So in order, if you had to chop that more than half of that off and turn it into the universal access counter with a lower counter, that it would substantially reduce the functionality of the counter for the people who don't require universal access, the lower counter height. So, and our understanding is that that is pretty much the minimum that would be required to have a functional counter for both groups. And because, as we noted, there's a good amount of horizontal siding preserved around this feature, that it doesn't so impair that little element of the entire building to the point that it can't convey the essential qualities of its character, which were the horizontal siding. And originally, as we all know, there was a smaller window off to the side that sort of faces the pool deck. And that was probably used to hand out towels. So it was a very small opening. So we feel that this change is supportable because it achieves the goal of universal access and functionality to, while not impairing the historic resource to the point that it would reduce its overall integrity of design materials.
I have a question for Mr. Winnick.
Sure.
Since we're in question here.
I guess, yeah, there's no just question periods officially, so.
Yeah. Commissioner Duncan raises some interesting questions. Did the design team consider lowering the prior approved opening so that it would be the same opening all the way across?
So thanks for asking the question. So the part of the question that you asked before was also about studying the horizontality.
Right.
So we definitely did study that alternative idea that we just shared. There's several things that it impacts. One is the aesthetics. Number two is functionality. So functionality on the inside, where there's equipment that sits beneath that counter, all that equipment becomes not useful when you have a lower counter zone, right? So the equipment there then becomes a difficulty. And from an aesthetic point of view, the proportion of having that lower window, if we had cut it, say, half of that into the lower window, it kept the other half higher for that use, it didn't read nicely horizontally. So this, we felt, kept, especially with that nice long line at the head where the eyebrow is, we felt that this design kept the horizontal reading that one associates with that sort of Swedish kind of aesthetic that Coral Casino has with the, sort of modern.
So the equipment that's behind the existing or the old prior improvement, what exactly is it?
It's service equipment, refrigerators and all the things that you have with food prep.
I see.
That are associated, which incidentally are there today. We're obviously improving it, but right now that's the same thing that is there on that wall. It just happened that the equipment was there, with a full wall.
I see. I think that answers my questions. Thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Maybe I see Commissioner Malcolm. Questions?
Has any work construction been started on this project yet?
Yes, but not on the portion that we're talking about today, just they have started the work on removing the siding for the portion that's been previously through. And that's gone well, and again, in catalog.
Okay, and why is the AD access was not anticipated a couple years ago?
It's interesting. We should have anticipated that we'd need to do this. It used to be that you could put a counter nearby without all the same functions, and that you could have that be accepted. So there are other examples where we've done like a counter where it doesn't have a window behind it that meets that requirement. That's no longer being accepted. So you could say we should have been maybe applying a more strict standard as we went ahead with the project. Well, I'm going to put this to a learning experience.
let's move to, ask if there's any public comment on this item.
I don't see anybody in the attendees calling for public comment.
Okay, thank you. So we have no public comment. So we'll move on to, our commissioners' comments. And let's start with Commissioner Malcolm.
If we can go to the document on page 9. Start with- Let's see the level of the report.
This is the one you're referring to?
Page 9, please, monitor community and update states.
Was it from this file?
Okay. Page 9 of that.
This is what would be page 9 on the document I have here.
It's not a PDF though, it's. you look at the-
Not
Page 8.
Oh, apologies. Gotcha.
Let's see, okay, where it says, in addition, the master community plan update states that third section there. Preserve and protect, I think it's preserve and protect properties, however, yeah, it stated that preserve and protect properties of structures, historic importance, to the maximum extent feasible, okay? I just wanted to point that out. And then we'll scroll down to page 10, please, one more page.
Keep going.
5.3 states. Previous studies have identified the horizontal wood boarding siding as a contributor to the building's architectural significance. Okay. And if you go back to page 9, please. Two, okay. So number 2 there, scroll a little bit, I'm sorry. Wait. Okay, there it is. That number 2, okay. Where it says number 2, historic character of property will be retained and preserved. The removal of distinctive materials or alterations of feature spaces, spatial relationships that characterize the property will be avoided. So trying to tie those two in, being that those horizontal wood boarding sidings is a contributor to the significance of it. The removal of those, it says, will be avoided. Will be avoided, not should be, shall be, will be avoided. And then if we continue on, let's see, number 9, please scroll down. New additions, exterior alterations or related construction will not destroy historic materials, features, and spatial relationship that characterize the property. It goes to our understanding of what is really destroying this material. Now, of course, you can cut it out and put it to a side and preserve it for maybe something in the future, but it's like cutting off a toe, putting a golf ball divot on it, and preserving the toe for if you want to put it back later. Now, something in there is a little bit wrong on this. That we are actually destroying part of the originality of the Coral Casino just for a convenient function of business. So my whole point really is, what are we doing here as a commission? Okay, let's see, next paragraph. Somewhere to propose alterations which would not remove significant amounts of historic or materials or design features. Yeah, I think our vote 2 years ago was a mistake. And right now they're coming back to say, okay, well, you approved this little bit of it, now we want a little bit more. We need, and it's just what 8 square feet of material that we're going to destroy, the originality of the Coral Casino. In addition to what we're already destroying and we approved already. That, I believe you made a mistake 2 years ago. I think right now is a good time, since none of the construction has started yet. We tell them that, hey, this is a bit too much. Or just go back to the drawing board to work with the original structure and find a way that will meet business needs, although it may not be convenient, but we need to preserve this gem of Santa Barbara County and not destroy what should not be destroyed. And one more point on page 11, if you will. Let's see here. Okay. It's trying to justify doing this as well, and I don't agree with this because it says the removal of additional stored fabric is confined to approximately square feet. Okay. The club interior in an area that is not visible to the public. That should not be a consideration. The visibility of the public, that just means people that are outside of the Coral Casino. Well, members of the public who pay their dues to be inside the Coral Casino, yeah, they can see that this is something that is visible. It's not something back of house or something that wasn't meant for guests to see. This is where the guests are sitting. You're basically destroying a part of what people are seeing. It's not so, because the non-paying public is saying it should not be a consideration. I think that's disingenuous. So I just wanted to put that out there for my fellow commissioners that, hey, we did make a mistake 2 years ago approving this, and we should not approve this today.
Thank you, Commissioner Nelson. Let's move right to left, so we'll go to Commissioner Knight.
Thank you. I appreciate Mr. Malcolm's comments. I believe, however, that situation that the applicant finds themselves in requires an adaptation to a legal requirement. This was not a perfect solution, but it's a solution that's tolerable to me, given the situation that they're faced with serving the public. That hallway where these windows or serving areas are situated is not a highly visible part of the entire facility, like the exterior elevations, for example. So I support this. It was being done with the best preservation options that they have, and they, again, it's not ideal from some standpoints, but I agree with the historians that, consulting historians, that this is an appropriate alteration.
Thank you, Commissioner Hyde. Commissioner Snow.
One of the things we are supposed to be looking at is to determine whether the project is exempt from the CEQA requirements. That's a point. But I do have to say, the whole procedure has changed so much from its original. The burden is actually water, I think I spent on my child with my daughter's child. And building what's there now is. It's gone through so many, and one of the CEQA is if you were piecemeal project. And I think this is an example of a very piecemeal project. But perhaps we won't do it. It's an exception.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner
the historian's consultant report is a secret document. They did their findings. So I think that box can be checked off. But I certainly do not disagree that cumulative effects are an issue in many of the projects that we see.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to my fellow commissioners for the perspective. And as to look at we were in wheelchair, we have different perspective. I do think cumulative impacts are something that should be concerned about. Certainly, the Corpusina has changed a lot. But I just try to put this in the best sort of balanced perspective. In terms of, I actually, looked at the resolution, and the resolution really applies to the exterior building. The Corpusina is different because you've got pools, the pool area, is part of the exterior building, versus part of the interior building. Historically, we looked at that too, like it was part of the, it was part of the exterior. But then you start to go around down a hallway, or this is a hallway between the pool area and another courtyard. This really is not an overly public place. And if you were to look at photographs of important architectural buildings for Santa Barbara, it wouldn't feature this little hallway, and show us, what was the tower pass through originally. The other thing that influences me, apart from it not being a highly visible, totally public situation, is that this is one part of adaptive reuse. In order to keep these buildings working for us, we have to keep working on the kitchens and the bathrooms, remember? And we're running into that all the time with our historic structures. And we're also trying to meet the handicap requirement. So I'm willing to give it a certain amount of leeway in that regard, in terms of that original material that you're having to tie into. And I think the plan is of a sufficient character design-wise that I don't think it's really going to interfere with the overall architectural impact of the building and how it appears. if anything, it'll just make it that more people want to use it. If more people can use this road, I think that's a very good place. So that's my perspective.
So I definitely hear Commissioner Malcolm, Commissioner Snow's concerns about this project. But I decide on that, I think this is a minor alteration and it has to be done for ADA purposes. It is in a hallway, it isn't that visible from the student. So I am going to support this change. So just someone like to do a motion for this? We need to approve the modifications or deny proposed changes to the previously approved development plan. We also have to determine that the project is exempt from secret pursuant to section 1.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, correct.
I would move that the Santa Barbara County Historic Landmarks Advisory Commission approve proposed changes to the previously approved development plan. Those are DDP 00000-0002 as the end of the most recently by 20 SCP 00000-0008. For the growth seen in Santa Barbara County 43, in order to meet the accessibility standards that are required and to require preservation of the material so that it can be used on any future maintenance projects for this historic landmark. And find that it is exempt from CEQA pursuant to section 15331 of the CEQA guidelines.
Thank you very much. Do we have a second?
I will second from Commissioner Nye.
Motion, we have a second. Let's do a roll call vote. Start with Commissioner Denison. Commissioner Snow.
Aye.
Commissioner Melton.
No.
And Chair Cochran, great. Thank you so much for
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
can we have like a 5-minute break before we move on? So let's come back right. Okay, I'm gonna call back, the Historic Landmarks Advisory Commission, for hearing of June 13th, 2022, after recess. And I believe now we're going back to, staff update, item number 4. Planning Development Planner will provide a brief oral report on items of general interest to the commission and members of the public, such as ordinance amendments and process for recently approved native habitat board procedures and the status of appeal hearings of budget for the commission. I'm wondering if this is the time to actually mention that our planner assigned to HLAC, County, Sean Stewart, gave his notice a few weeks ago. So at the moment, we do not have a planner assigned to us. So we're working on it. We have this.
Travis Seawards.
Yeah, is, I'm hoping that by the next meeting, we'll have someone assigned to us. So at the moment, we do not have a plan.
I was talking with David about this, and I don't know if I should.
Probably should. But I just wanted to let everyone know Sean Stewart's no longer. That's why we do not have a plan for this. Except for Dave stepped in for a little bit this morning, but he officially wasn't.
I learned accidentally, as he contacted me, that Sean was not working for the city. Some sort of plan. Just throw that.
So since we don't have a plan here, I guess we really don't have staff. So I will honor to.
I have a project.
Do you have anything?
Yeah, just give me 1 second. I can update you on a project coming to HLAC for next month.
And I'm sorry, I won't mention something. Well, I guess I can just go forward right. At previous agenda item, he's had a letter that's going to Lake Chuma, concerning Lake Chuma, and I went in to the office on May and signed the letter, and it was mailed out. I don't think we've heard back from them yet, but I just wanted everyone to know that that letter was signed from county.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
since you mentioned that, and we're probably set. I did have contact from a member of the public who was interested in that, his name is Jim Baker. And so she wanted staff to make sure she's contacted if any information comes in and we're talking about it. She wants to be on the list. Her name is Jim Baker. She actually used to live at the park, and her stepfather was the. If you don't have that contact information.
Absolutely. We for staff update, we just have one project coming to HLAC for next month. Currently, the Malone alterations. It should be from here. The Malone alterations. It's for a resources technical report that will study the historic resources at the site.
Okay, thank you so much for staff update. Let's move on to item number 5, project discussion. The County Historic Landmarks Advisory Commission, HLAC, will discuss funding potential projects and supplemental letters / information about receipt. So this is back to, we're talking about our budget and potentially what we want to do. I guess that we want to say something during that one item agenda, so let's use that hours. Okay, suggestions.
Yes, I was so glad. I read to put this on the project. Because it's the ongoing project that Mr. Urban has just done part of it for us. The ongoing project is to keep these things in order, how will that happen? And so there's a number of different aspects of that. Snow touched on the issue of maybe you have less in the boxes, so that they do that. But the other thing is making sure that there's a staff member or a commission that actually inputs these things, so that not only do they get stored in the appropriate box, they're actually typed into the database. So that brings up another question: who has access to this inventory database? Who is the caretaker of it, and who can amend it or not amend it? I do know for myself, for instance, I would love to just have a hard copy print of that spreadsheet database, at least the left-hand side of it, so that I could have that on my person if I wanted to go up and access those files. So I think that would be valuable for us to have. And we're going to have to go in and look for those items that he was not able to find. It is interesting that a bunch of them are new ones, and some of them are ones that somebody pulled out, they're going to see a edge, so that we talked about it, and now it's no longer where it would have been. So, and I have dates for all those things in terms of where they were originally discussed, but that was certainly the things that we want to do is address specifically the things that he directed to us, the omissions, and then there's also the issue of other materials, as Randy discussed. How are we going to get that dealt with also? So we've got a number of small laundry list of things that complete the project and then the perpetuation going forward. So I'd just like to make sure that we don't totally drop that ball, and maybe on a future agenda, if anybody wants to focus on that, they might bring it back to us as to how we can make sure that happens.
I have to comment or you could comment?
No, it's the chair always goes last. So go ahead.
Thank you. I certainly agree with Mr. Duncan has the issues he has raised, and those are questions we need to address. The ongoing physical care of records and organizations. We have Jonathan, who's spread thin, and we don't have a knowledgeable person there on staff that would do some of this. I can't help but think that we would have some insights on where some of these records are. They're in places in the office that Chris clearly didn't have access to. Other files here and there, they're not that much. For example, the Cypress Inclusive Lake, which is sitting somewhere. And so, yeah, I agree that there are questions we need to address going forward across the board. But then I also have an alternative new project, which isn't really new, but we never got our website product today. And my question for Chris, unfortunately, not here anymore, but something tells me that he had a lot to do with setting up the current Lebanon Library website. He spent his whole career prior to this working in digital and computer. Totally alien to my knowledge. He was in that field. That's why he's so good at it. And I have a feeling that we could assign him to upgrade our website. Now that it's located in all files, hopefully we'll find some of the stuff that we are missing on the website as far as backup information. Given that the county planning, I'm sure has some sort of guidelines for websites that it follows. We have to work in sync with them, but this is something a subcommittee can go into. Something that Maxine and I were working on prior to this time. It's now that we've brought the physical materials up to date and organized for the moment. The major task, major need is the website. That probably the public interacts with us the most on that. So that's an idea for us to talk about, and if the commission is okay, I will broach it with Chris. But I can do that. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, this is based on what work he's done for us so far. He's a good worker, and if we can get some of these other things done with his help, I'd be all for it.
I guess I would agree. I'll go back to where report on the newspaper articles. Yeah, I would like to keep those in our archive as well. How much are those archival sleeves? Are they that expensive?
I know they're not that expensive. One thing to remember, as far as the original newspaper clippings, even if they're in a sleeve, they're still going to crumble up. And I think that's something that Chris probably added back in his mind too, but it wouldn't be a big expense. To put those in sleeves, it just matters somebody. Yeah. Xerox on that and save the old ones.
Well, I was just concerned as part of receiving his information and approving everything, that part of the information that he suggested was not implemented, the part of throwing away. So I wanted to suggest to keep them. So that was my big point.
Well, I agree very much like Mr. to have to finish it. You respond, you were working on trying to see if there were plaques. Went around it to photos and just keep the record of photos.
There's a column I don't think he addressed. I didn't even think of that.
So
I'm amazed that he missed one. Yeah, do they have, which ones have plaques?
Yeah,
You guys did the work.
yeah, we discovered that several didn't have it, and some made one, and some.
When
One of them I couldn't even find where it was.
That's an open can of worms because
Yeah.
do we want to pay for plaques or are we going to continue having them pay for their own? And just do pay for it, like what's the standard? And that whole thing, what will we pay for as opposed to if somebody wants an upgrade plaque, would they pay for that? Et cetera, et
This
cetera.
is what I think what we should do. Is we have a lot of ideas here. We did have a subcommittee that actually went to all the sites. Maybe we can propose that they can come back with what projects like continue, see if he wants to continue, complete some of these ideas that we're doing. I think we need to put it down, whatever the subcommittee, whoever's on this, look at how do we make sure that the files don't end up being just forward and future. I personally think like hearing support, they're always here at a meeting. That should be part of their job is to just go ahead and use the database, and that's something we have to find out to the county. But I think that subcommittee should list these potential, what are we gonna do with, like, right now, we have some projects we did today. Who is going to put that file in the right spot? The subcommittee put that down. They talk about the website, being updated. In other words, we can kind of do some priorities and come back to the full commission, and then the full commission can decide what to do. I personally was going to mention the plaques because we have a budget. We should have a system that when we do a historic landmark, do we fund the plaque right then after we approve it? Should we do that? I mean, that's something that subcommittee could look into. If it's a private home, maybe there isn't necessary to have a plaque, but if it's a public and when people visit, then we should do it. I mean, this is something we need to discuss. And we can't do it here, but I think the subcommittee go through and outline all of these items. So I guess I just ask for people that would like to be on this subcommittee. It's a continuation of kind of what we did. So I know Commissioner Duncan has all the materials. So
I will continue with the materials.
My question is, because we are talking about our budget, should we increase our budget to maybe pay Mr. to continue getting the materials after our meetings?
well, I think that's where we, that's something you kind of staff. I mean, if it's done properly, it can take very long to and file. That should be an easy thing. We just need to have a system in place to work this. So let's get a subcommittee and discuss this, bring it back. I would think Commissioner Duncan would want to be on the subcommittee. But if you don't, go right ahead. Okay.
But it would be nice to have a story.
That's what I was thinking, Commissioner and I.
And I'm down here, I mean, I'm the first person. So I should have.
So Commissioner Stone, are we on this?
Yeah, oh, you are?
Okay. So Commissioner Elton, would you like to be on this?
Now, what does specifically?
Well, it's going to put together all these ideas that we brought together. One is how are we going to continue this great work that was done so it doesn't go toward reverse. So that would be one thing. The other thing is looking at our budget and to see what is prioritized first. Do we want Chris Urban to continue do the archival things that he was talking about that needs to be done, possibly having to do website update, and then talk about plaques? Should that be something we should think of a system going forward whenever we do? But I think all of these things are very important. We don't have the money for all of these things, so we need to prioritize what they are. Well, I requested the rollover, so in case that might be some extra money, because I did ask that for the website. That rollover was specifically asked to update our website. Send that. I don't know if we're going to get it, but I did ask it.
We don't. We get a set amount every year.
Yeah, we have a set
Until
amount.
that changes.
We have our budget. Yeah, you can look at to see where we're at the moment. Okay. So we have a subcommittee now of commissioners. Well, I have Commissioner Duncan and I have Commissioner Knott. Now, who else would like to be on this?
No, I'm fine with all of it. No, we have.
Let's do Commissioner Duncan. We already have the subcommittees, Commissioner stuff, so let's do
We
Commissioner.
were all on this original one.
Yeah, well,
You're not going to do it,
I'm not
so
gonna
that's why I figured.
Okay. Okay, Commissioner Duncan, Commissioner Nye, and Commissioner Malcolm will be on the subcommittee, and the three will work out. Okay.
No, I thank you for doing it because I need your help.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. I
Yeah.
like place to work.
Okay, let's move on. We just did item 6, so let's move on to item 7, which is district reports. Individual commissioners may present brief reports that would be of interest to the public and or commission as a whole. No official action will be taken on any individual. So who has any district reports?
Well, we have our walking up.
I-
really like it when we do that one.
Okay, so it's just. Yeah, so I will go over, Rocky Nook Park and what the subcommittee's been doing. Okay, to go over first is after our last meeting, I've been having discussions with county council and Ryerson, which thank you very much because you really helped me a lot with this whole process. But she decided, and I decided that we had too many people on our last subcommittee on Rocky Nook Park and it made problems with Brown Act. So we should really only have 3 people on our subcommittee for Rocky Nook Park. So unfortunately, I had to, and then it was also I could go ahead and appoint those people to the subcommittee as chair. So what I did is I appointed Sheila Snow and Commissioner Snow and Commissioner Nye and myself to be on the subcommittee. Unfortunately, Commissioner Ritosh was on it last time, and I figured that, just go to 3 because of Brown Act. We have to be very careful that we're not talking to each other about it. So I did that on May 9th. I appointed them. And on May 18th, I sent an email to Jeff Lindgren and Chris Nevin. Jeff Lindgren is Assistant Director of County Parks, and Chris Nevin is the County Public Works Deputy Director of Transportation Division. And I sent an email to them because they, the county, as you know, in the past, had some concerns about the resolution. So I sent an email to open it up to them. And if they have any concerns that we should meet, and let's have a discussion with the subcommittee in them. Any new concerns or previous concerns that we need to discuss about moving forward with the resolution. And so I sent that email on May 18th, and I didn't have any response. So on June 3rd, I did a follow-up email to them, and immediately the day after, I got a response from Public Works, and they would like to meet. I worded the meeting basically the email, basically if they don't have any objections, we'll just move forward. If they do, let's have a meeting and let's discuss. So they decided they wanted to have a meeting to discuss. So we set up a Zoom meeting for June 7th, and on the Zoom meeting, I had Chris Nevin, Jeff Lindgren, and then Gary Smart, who's a traffic engineer, joined the meeting. Commissioner Nye and myself was on the meeting. Sheila Snow, unfortunately, had car problems and she could not make it. So we had a very positive meeting. It was about over an hour, very open, and everyone was very frank on the positions. And I'm not going to go into who said what because it's not on the agenda, but I have to just say that I thought it was a very good meeting, and we had it's very open, very candid, which I thought was very good. No one held back, and I think it's very well done. So after the meeting, we decided that the subcommittee needs to meet to discuss the Zoom meeting and actually have a walkthrough at Rocky Nook Park. So we have scheduled a meeting for this Wednesday, June 15th. And we're going to do a walkthrough at Rocky Nook Park and sit down and discuss the resolution. I guess I can clarify that the original resolution that was back in 2017 has been updated, and that was with the help with county staff, county council and Ryerson again helped with that, and of course Commissioner Duncan helped with the updated resolution. And it looks like probably the resolution will be updated a bit more before we bring it forward. So that is my report on the Rocky Nook Park subcommittee. Like I say, we've been very busy and we're going to be meeting this Wednesday. So any other district reports? Any questions? Okay. move on to the last item, which is our back to our standard agenda. Jumping around, and this is the Botanic Garden memorandum. The County Historic Landmarks Advisory Commission will review a memorandum on the differences in interpretation of resolution number 2003-059, Santa Barbara Botanic Garden County Landmark. I have a question first. I want to read kind of a background to the memorandum to everybody, but I have a question for staff and I guess for Ms. Ryerson. We did not put on this agenda item to a vote to approve or attach to original resolution, which is what our idea was when we had done this. So I'm wondering if we can approve this, but does it have to come back to another agenda item to be able to attach it to the original resolution? Because the way this is worded, it doesn't say that we do an action.
I think there's sufficient information on here to allow you to approve the memorandum.
Great.
Attaching it to the resolution.
We want to have it in the file with the resolution of the memorandum. If it's approved today.
So the resolution was approved by the Board of Supervisors. So, I mean, I think it could be in the paper files in planning's records, but I don't think it would be actually an attachment to the Board of Supervisors.
Oh, okay. Maybe it could just be in the file box. Okay, before we get started, I'd like to read the background because this has been a long process. And I have to say, Commissioner Duncan originally did a really nice background of this project. And I wasn't going to originally have it attached to the memorandum that you have in front of you. But with counsel from planner Nicole Blue, she said it wasn't necessary to be in the memorandum, which makes sense. But at least I want to read the background so everyone's up to date about how we get to where we are today. It's a little long, but I want to just go ahead and read this, and then we can ask for any questions. It says, on Friday, April 1st, HLAC Chair Keith Hoffman Gray and Commissioner Lansing Duncan met with planning and development staff members to discuss HLAC's interpretation of the Board of Supervisors resolution designating the Santa Barbara Botanic Gardens a historic landmark. Follow-up to HLAC's consideration of the Backcountry Garden project on March 14th. At the February 14th hearing, HLAC questioned staff's interpretation of how the Board of Supervisors resolution for the garden should be applied. As a result, staff met twice with the chair and the vice chair in order to coordinate on or discuss the meaning of the resolution before consideration of the Backcountry Garden project returned to HLAC. At the March 14th meeting, 2022 hearing, staff presented to the commission a more detailed interpretation of the resolution that suggested HLAC had minimal authority to evaluate the project because changes to the garden were not subject to HLAC review. This analysis was based on staff's reading of paragraph 2B2. A majority of the commission disagreed with staff's interpretation and suggested another way to interpret the paragraph. Members of the commission wish to document this different interpretation of the resolution and memorialize it for the record in HLAC's future consideration of Santa Barbara Botanic Garden projects. But it was unclear at the end of a long agenda what was the best means to do so. Therefore, staff suggested that a smaller meeting with staff and HLAC leadership might result in a recommendation as to the best path forward. If necessary, the discussion and means of implementation could be brought back to the commission. Originally, the chair and vice chair were proposed to meet with staff, but when it was found that the vice chair would not be available, the chair requested Commissioner Duncan serve as a substitute. At the April 1st meeting, which was held via Zoom, Deputy Director Travis Stevers and Supervisor Planner Nicole Blue explained the difficulties encountered in bringing consideration of the Backcountry Garden project to the HLAC. Hoffman Gray and Duncan expressed appreciation for staff's efforts and explained how HLAC felt its purview extended beyond the limited review of we're working. So that's kind of the background of where we are today. So as was mentioned, we talked about bringing back to do a memorandum of our differences in opinions with planning development on the interpretation of the resolution. So we have the resolution in front of you. And let's see, we start with first of all, I have to ask for disclosures for anybody that has to step down.
I could sit down and I would assume as a member of the public, I can sit up there. But I can't go over full time.
That's correct, right? She can still stay in the room.
I guess legally allowed to stay around, we usually recommend against but I also want to know you're not gonna learn anymore.
Oh.
I couldn't understand.
You're not gonna have a quorum anymore.
So we won't be glad to bring this back. Let's just start all over again.
So we can't even discuss, right? Because we don't have a forum, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, well, it sounds like the July 11th meeting might be a very big meeting. Okay, yes, go ahead.
Can we know why it is that you're stepping down on this?
I actually own property. I own the property that abuts this project on Tunnel 1201 Tunnel Road. I inherited it from my friend Susan Marati, and I've been involved in that area since the early 60s. So I actually know stuff about this, and that's why I feel badly being accused, and I don't have a negative because I own the property. It's more that I actually am very aware of what's going on. So, yeah. And that's why I would like to hear as a member of the public or get my husband out here, or my daughter who's on the property. That's why
Council, but council thinks about this.
I have recommended refusal. And unfortunately, you won't have a quorum, but.
So I suggest as chair, I'll ask to put this on the agenda for the July 11th meeting. The meetings we will have. And we should have it. So after that, that's the last item on the agenda.
Mr.
So,
Chair.
yes, go ahead.
Just like with our minutes, I suggested changes to them where we couldn't actually vote on them. I've got some suggested changes to the memorandum, having read it over once again. So could we at least, when this comes back, have those suggested changes made?
Can we?
I also have suggested changes.
So I guess we should wait.
So, but I don't know if we can do the same thing with this memo.
This is different from minutes.
It's different from minutes, so I don't know how we should have, if we can handle it.
I mean, it'd be nice to be able to put this so that it can be put together and brought back to us at the next meeting or voted in or form, but for further discussion, it would be the people that are not here that will be the next, will be able to still discuss the proposed changes.
I think you can submit your proposed changes to the author of the document.
I'm sorry, Mr. I can't hear.
You could submit your proposed changes to the author of the document.
Since I put it in writing and send it to staff and ask it to be circulated.
Well, I wrote the document, so just give it to me and then I can revise.
Mr. Duncan?
Mr. Duncan over the weekend, or actually it was on Friday, he had some changes which were they put in the box, those changes, or were you just gonna show them?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Mr. Martin, did you put the potential changes in the box like in 2 minutes, or were you just gonna show them?
I was gonna show the potential changes that was provided by Duncan, but I don't
So
believe
no
those
one
were.
else has seen them except for Commissioner Dunn. So I guess I could redo the memorandum with the changes, proposed changes, and if anyone else has any changes they want to send to me between now and the next meeting, I could put it all together and forward a new memorandum.
Okay,
Does that sound good?
I would say not just anyone, you had a subcommittee, right?
Well, just Commissioner Dunn, so.
Okay. I just don't wanna have a collective, you know, decision made outside of the meeting, but I think you two are already collaborating, Brown Act wise, that's fine.
what happens if,
Just send it to me without discussion, and then there wouldn't be like a time.
what if two suggestions conflict? Then
Well, I guess if.
What does the author do?
Bring both of them.
You bring both of them.
Let it.
That's fair.
talk it out.
that's what I
We're all gonna talk about it in the next meeting anyway. It's not.
And just as much as we can.
Yeah, and I'll mention there's differences.
Okay.
Okay, I adjourn this meeting.